This is the second part of the video on operational scenario number 10 in 1904-1905, Russo-Japanese War from the Great War at Sea series. So what happens, I'm not going to provide a lot of details on that. It's just mostly going to be an overview of how this game went. And the game starts on May 23rd, 1905. It starts out misty, and through that entire day, basically the Russian fleet in Shanghai starts sailing toward Korea, where it's going to try to get through the straits and get up to Vladivostok. And the Japanese are just patrolling with Fleet Number 2, which is a lot of patrol boats and things like that to try to establish contact with the Russians, which will then trigger Fleet Number 1, which is where all the heavy guns are, to come out and attack. So on the first day, there is no contact through all 6 turns. It just stays misty, and the Russian fleet passes toward those straits. And then we go to the next day, May 24th of 1905, and for the most part, it remains misty, and the Japanese continue patrolling the Tsushima Straits area, and you can see in the picture that the Russians are continuing to make their way. So then we go to the third day, May 25th of 1905, and the weather starts to change. It goes to fog and then into a squall, and then it goes into twilight with a squall, and then you will see that we are near contact. So on the night turn, the squall turns to fog, and the 2 fleets pass each other through the Tsushima Straits. The Japanese try to get a contact, and they roll a straight 6, which is an automatic contact. You don't need any modifiers. So that was a little bit lucky. Unfortunately, it's not the best weather here, and it's nighttime, but I went through the first round. At long range is where the first round has to start using the basic combat method. And 1 Japanese Type 21 torpedo boat was sunk, and 3 cruisers suffered some damage in this initial attack. But the Japanese admiral decided to withdraw. The Russians wanted to engage further because they could see that there was a weakness here in the Japanese fleet. But the Japanese win the die roll, and they slip away, and we go into turn 18, which is still a night turn, and the weather turns to squall. And the Japanese fleet at Masapo sets sail because now they are released because of this initial engagement. And that fleet is led by Admiral Togo, and the Russian fleet is just going to continue on its way to Vladivostok and try to evade contact if possible. We go into turn 19. It's daytime now. It is May 26th of 1905. The squall continues, and you can see in this picture there is another close meeting, and then on turn 20, it's still the same day, but the weather turns to storm. So this is unfortunate for the Japanese, but Togo makes contact anyway, and a battle is going to break out, but because of the weather, only primary guns will be able to be used, which is kind of unfortunate for the Japanese. And frankly, round 1 was quite rough on the Japanese attacker, and they suffered a fair amount of damage. We went into a second round, not too much damage on either side, but on round 3, the Russian battleship Suvorov sustained heavy damage with 2 hull hits. And then in round 4, there was more damage to the Suvorov. And then on turn 21, we go into because we've gone 4 rounds, we're going into an operational term. And we see that the storm is continuing. So we're going to go to the battle round 5 now, which results in some minor damage for both sides. But then in round 6, the Japanese battleship Fuji is sunk, which is very unfortunate for the Japanese. The Russians really would like to withdraw because their objective is really to get to Vladivostok. They don't care about the Japanese fleet. But the Japanese want to continue fighting, and the Russians win this tie and manage to extricate themselves from the battle. And then we go into turns 21 through 23, where it goes into twilight, and then the storm at nighttime settles down into a squall, and then just into fog. And then we go into the next day, May 27th of 1905. And the day starts out with fog. The Japanese conduct a search, and they do make contact again with the Russian fleet. Round 1 always starts at long range, and there are lots of damage in this first round to both sides. Going into round 2, the Japanese want to try to close so that they can use their torpedoes. The Russians, of course, want to withdraw, but this time the Japanese win and move into close range. So now not only can the primary and secondary guns fire, but the tertiary guns can fire as well as torpedoes. So we'll see how this goes. It starts out in round 2, doesn't go well for the Japanese because the cruiser Chitose is sunk, and then the Russian Admiral Seniavin sinks, and then the Japanese battleship Asahi is sunk by a Russian torpedo from one of the destroyers. Also, the Orel was hit by a torpedo from Japanese destroyers. The Russian Suvorov ended up sunk by torpedoes from Akazuchi class destroyers. The Awaiti is hit by Russian destroyers, torpedoes, but no damage. Then the Russian cruiser Aurora suffers a hull hit from Akazuchi destroyers. Then the Russian Admiral Nakhimov is sunk. The cruiser Svietlana is sunk. And we're going to go into round 3. Of course, the Russians would like to move into long range for one, but the Japanese want to keep it at short range. And this time the Russians win, so the battle moves to long range. And the reason the Russians wanted to move to long range is they can't disengage at short range. So it's a step-by-step process. Anyway, the battle continues, and the Imperator Alexander ends up sinking the Japanese armored cruiser Kasuga. And then the Japanese cruiser Asagi is sunk by the Russian cruiser Aurora. And then the Japanese cruiser Tsushima hits the Admiral Ushakov, and that sinks. So this didn't actually work out that great. The Japanese lost quite a few ships here, but they really want to get the Russian fleet. So in round 4, the Russians attempt to disengage. The Japanese want to try to keep it at long range. Now that they've used their torpedoes up, the Japanese win, and so the battle's going to continue at long range. And this time, the Russian armored cruiser Vladimir Monomakhin is sunk. Then on turn 25, we have to take, in round 5, an operational round. So the weather stays at fog, and now it's daytime. But the Russians decide they want to withdraw, and they do succeed. So it is a day turn, and turn 26 is missed. You can see in the picture that the forces are separating, and then on turn 27, it's still daytime, and the forces are out of contact. With the modifier for Togo, he's on his flagship Mikasa. The Japanese are able to make contact. This was, not the best roll, but because of the presence of the admiral, They got in a battle at range 1. So the Imperator Alexander III sinks the cruiser Naniwa. And then as we go into round 2, I start realizing, if I was playing competitively, I probably would just push the Japanese to keep attacking the Russian fleet and to stop them at all costs. But I'm really playing for the story, and Togo's assessment is that, look, we've lost 2 battleships. The Fuji and Asahi is sunk. The armored cruiser Kasuga is sunk. The cruisers Kasagi and Shitoshi are sunk. And I've got the battleship Shikishima dead in the water, the armored cruiser Yakuma dead in the water, and I have a bunch of guns out, and my fleet is wrecked. So I don't think I have a whole lot more hope. So I'm just accepting defeat instead of destroying myself completely. So I've decided to try to break off as the Japanese. And of course, the Russians don't really want to mess with my fleet. They want to get to Vladivostok intact. So the battle ends, and then what happens as we go into nighttime and the Japanese start heading back to base, the Russian moves the fleet toward Vladivostok, and you can see in the picture they start separating. Unfortunately, on turn 30, the weather turns to a squall. That's not good because the Japanese have 2 ships dead in the water, and they can sink in bad weather. And we go on to May 28th of 1905. It's turn 31. The weather turns to storm. And then on turn 32, it's a day turn again, but the weather goes to gale, and this is bad. The Japanese have a ton of destroyers and torpedo boats out on the open sea, and they all could be sunk, are at risk of being sunk by the weather. And in the end, 7 Japanese destroyers sink due to the gale, as well as 6 torpedo boats. And then the armored cruiser Yakuma, which is dead in the water, sinks because of the gale. And the Russians also lose 1 destroyer to the weather, but that's not a big deal. Then we go to turn 33, still the same day, still gale, and the Japanese lose 5 more destroyers, and they don't lose any PT boats. They all made it back to the port on the last turn. And then on turn 34, the gale subsides back to storm, but the battleship Shikishima goes down in the storms. But Admiral Togo's fleet arrived safely in port at Busan. You can see that in the photo. And then the next 2 turns are nighttime, and it continues to be a storm, but the Russians don't have any foundering ships, so they're not worried. We go into May 29th of 1905, and through all 3 day turns, we have a squall and stormy weather. And then by turn 41, the Russian fleet arrives at Vladivostok. What you can see has happened here, I'm not even going to add up the points. I mean, for the most part, the Japanese did sink 61 victory points worth of Russian ships. Okay, but a lot of the Russian ships made it to Vladivostok, and those all count for victory points. And the Japanese took severe losses. The battleship Shikishima, Fuji, Asahi, Yakuma, and Kasuga all were sunk. The cruisers Naniwa, Chitoshi, and Kasagi was sunk. 36 points were awarded for the 12 destroyers that were sunk, and 7 PT boats were sunk. So this was just a disaster. And I think part of it was that the first battle with the initial contact didn't go well for the Japanese. They weren't able to sustain that. And then the first battle with the main fleet, it just went very poorly for the Japanese. And then the icing on the cake was when the weather went to gale, and they lost all those destroyers, and the 2 ships that were dead in the water were sunk. So I mean, this is a massive Russian victory. So anyway, thank you for watching if you stayed this long, and I hope that you have a great day, and stay tuned if you want to see more gaming videos.